Hello everyone, if you have your own paranormal experiences you'd like to share, please send them to our channel. Remember, we're not looking for fiction, but real accounts of unexplained events. Stay safe out there, and remember, not all ghosts are scary. Some just need help finding their way home. In 2003, the Dalton family left the crowded suburbs of Chicago and moved into a century-old farmhouse in rural Indiana. For Mark and Karen Dalton, it was an opportunity to raise their two children, 16-year-old Hannah and 11-year-old Jacob, away from the noise of the city. The house sat on 5 acres of cornfields, surrounded by dense woods. The price was impossibly low, but the Daltons chalked it up to its age and isolation. The first night, Hannah noticed something strange. As she unpacked boxes in her upstairs room, she saw faint writing carved into the inside of her closet door. It looked like a child's scrawl, "Don't let her in." She laughed it off, figuring it was graffiti from the previous owners. But on the second night, things began to change. Jacob awoke screaming that someone was standing at the foot of his bed. When his parents rushed in, they found him shaking, pointing toward the corner of the room. "She was right there," he sobbed. "The lady in black." Karen tried to calm him, explaining it was just a nightmare, but the boy refused to sleep in that room again. They let him sleep on the couch downstairs until he woke one night to see a dark figure gliding across the living room, its long dress dragging across the floorboards. Soon, the entire family began hearing noises. Heavy boots stomping in the attic. Doors opening and slamming in the middle of the night. Voices whispering their names when no one else was around. Then came the smell. It started faint, like rotting meat, seeping from the walls of the upstairs hallway. No amount of scrubbing or repainting could make it go away. Sometimes, late at night, the smell grew so overpowering that it made the children gag. Hannah swore she could see flies crawling out of the gaps in the wallpaper, though when her mother checked, the wall was clean. The family cat disappeared a few weeks in. They searched the fields, the woods, even the barn, but found nothing. Days later, Jacob opened the same closet with the carved warning and found the cat's collar inside, smeared with something dark and sticky. That was when Mark finally admitted something was very wrong. He contacted the county records office and uncovered the home's history. In the 1920s, the farmhouse had belonged to the Blackwood family. Neighbors avoided them, whispering about strange rituals in the woods at night. The story went that Mrs. Blackwood had gone mad after the death of her youngest daughter. Some believed she turned to occult practices to bring her child back. One autumn evening, the family was found dead inside the farmhouse, every mirror shattered, every candle burned down to the wick. The mother's body was discovered in the upstairs hallway, her face mutilated beyond recognition. Mark didn't tell the children everything, but the atmosphere in the house grew unbearable. Hannah claimed she could hear scratching under her bed, like fingernails dragging across the wood. Jacob began sleepwalking, waking up outside in the fields with no memory of how he got there. Once, Karen found him standing barefoot in the barn at 3 a.m., whispering in a low voice that wasn't his own. The breaking point came one stormy night in late October. The power went out, plunging the farmhouse into darkness. The family gathered in the living room with candles. As the wind howled outside, they heard the sound of someone coming down the stairs. Slow, deliberate footsteps. Everyone froze, staring at the staircase. Then she appeared. A woman, tall and gaunt, wearing a tattered black dress, her hair hanging in wet ropes across her face. Her skin was ashen, her eyes 2 dark hollows. She didn't walk, she seemed to glide, her feet never touching the steps. The candles flickered violently as the figure pointed a skeletal finger toward Jacob. The boy collapsed, convulsing on the floor. Karen screamed, cradling her son as his lips turned blue. Mark shouted, demanding the thing leave them alone, but the figure only tilted its head. The air filled with the stench of rot and sulfur. Then, just as suddenly, the figure vanished. They rushed Jacob to the hospital, but doctors found nothing physically wrong with him. He was unconscious for nearly 24 hours, muttering in his sleep, "Don't let her in. Don't let her in." The Daltons didn't return to the farmhouse. They packed their belongings in daylight, refusing to stay another night. The house still sits abandoned, hidden by overgrown cornfields and collapsing barns. Local teens dare each other to break inside, but most don't stay long. Neighbors say they've seen lights flicker in the upstairs windows, even though the power has been shut off for years. Some claim they hear a woman singing in the woods at night, her voice carrying across the fields. And if you're unlucky enough to step inside the Blackwood farmhouse, they say you'll smell it too, the stench of rot, lingering in the walls. And sometimes, carved into the wood of the old closets, you'll still find the words, "Don't let her in." In 1997, the Ramirez family moved into what they thought would be their dream home on Ashford Lane, just outside San Antonio, Texas. The property was large, the house old but charming, and the price shockingly low. The realtor explained it away, saying the home had sat empty for nearly a decade after the last owner had moved away suddenly. The family didn't ask too many questions. They signed the papers, excited to start fresh. The first night was uneventful. Boxes stacked in corners, mattresses on the floor, the sound of cicadas drifting in from the open windows. But by the second night, strange things began to happen. Maria, the mother, woke up to the sound of footsteps creaking across the upstairs hallway. She thought it was her husband, but when she turned over, she saw him asleep beside her. The footsteps stopped right outside their bedroom door. She held her breath, waiting for the knob to turn. It didn't. The next morning, she convinced herself it had just been the house settling. But the footsteps came back the following night. And the night after that. Soon, their youngest daughter, Elena, started complaining about the woman in the hall. She was only 5 at the time, too young to invent stories with such chilling detail. She described the woman as tall, wearing a long dark dress, with a face that looked like it was melting. By the third week, the family noticed objects moving on their own. A chair would scrape across the floor when no one was near it. Picture frames tilted as though someone had pressed their fingers against the glass. The family cat refused to go upstairs at all, hissing at the staircase whenever someone tried to carry her up. One night, Mr. Ramirez stayed up late to finish some work in the dining room. At around 2 a.m., he heard whispering coming from the kitchen. He assumed it was one of the kids sneaking a late-night snack, but when he stepped inside, the room was empty. The refrigerator door hung wide open, and every light bulb in the kitchen flickered. He shut the fridge, turned off the light, and went back to his papers only to look up and see a figure reflected in the window glass. A woman was standing directly behind him. He spun around, heart racing, but there was no one there. Things escalated quickly after that. The Ramirez children began having night terrors, screaming so violently in their sleep that neighbors could hear them from outside. Elena would wake up with scratches down her arms, though her bedroom door had been locked from the inside. Their oldest son, Gabriel, 12 years old, refused to sleep in his room after he saw a shadowy figure crouched in the corner by his desk. Maria, desperate, asked around the neighborhood about the house. That's when she learned why the home had been abandoned for so long. In 1987, a woman named Margaret Holloway lived there with her 2 sons. She was a deeply religious woman, but also unstable. Neighbors reported hearing her screaming Bible verses in the middle of the night, claiming demons were in her house. One evening, a fire broke out. Firefighters found Margaret dead in the upstairs hallway, her body blocking the door to her children's room. Both boys were trapped inside and perished in the flames. No one had lived in the house since. Maria shared this story with her husband, but he dismissed it as superstition. Until the night he woke up choking. He described it later as though invisible hands had wrapped around his throat, pressing until he couldn't breathe. He thrashed violently until Maria shook him awake. Red marks ringed his neck, shaped like fingers. The family finally decided to leave. But on their last night in the house, as they finished packing, every light turned on at once. The air was filled with the overwhelming stench of smoke, thick and suffocating. The children screamed that their rooms were on fire. Maria ran upstairs to find the hall glowing orange, flames licking the walls. But when she tried to touch the fire, her hand passed straight through. It wasn't real, it was a vision. Still, the heat was undeniable. As they ran for the front door, Maria swore she saw a woman standing at the top of the stairs. Her dress was blackened and torn, her skin blistered and charred, but her eyes were wide and furious. She screamed something, though the sound was warped, like a roar beneath the crackling of flames. The last thing Maria saw before they fled was the figure rushing toward them. The Ramirez family never went back for the rest of their belongings. They abandoned the house and moved in with relatives, shaken and terrified. To this day, the house on Ashford Lane still stands. Locals claim they hear cries coming from the windows at night. And if you walk by after dark, some say you'll smell smoke on the breeze, though the house hasn't burned since 1987. In 2011, the Parker family moved into a two-story colonial on Briarwood Drive in Dayton, Ohio. The neighborhood was quiet, the schools were good, and the price of the house was far lower than anything comparable in the area. For David and Lisa Parker and their children 14 years old Emily and 8-year-old Noah, it seemed like the perfect fresh start. But almost immediately, the house felt wrong. On their first night, as boxes still cluttered the hallways, Noah asked his mother, "Who was the man upstairs?" Lisa froze. No one had been upstairs, everyone was still in the living room. When she asked what he meant, Noah described a tall man with no eyes standing in the hallway outside his bedroom door. They tried to laugh it off, but the laughter didn't last long. Within the first week, Emily began waking up to find her bedroom door wide open, though she always locked it at night. One morning, she woke to see small muddy footprints across her carpet that started by her bed and ended at the closet. They were too small to belong to her father, too large to be her brother's. The house itself seemed alive. The walls groaned as if something heavy pressed against them. Lights flickered no matter how many times they replaced the bulbs. Every night at exactly 3:17 a.m., the pipes rattled so violently that the whole house shook. And then came the knocking. At first, it was faint, on the walls of the upstairs hallway. But soon it moved closer. A slow, steady knock at their bedroom doors in the middle of the night. When David threw the door open, the hallway would be empty. But once, when he peered down the stairwell, he swore he saw someone standing at the bottom, tall, thin, head tilted at an impossible angle. The figure vanished when he blinked. The family tried to convince themselves that it was stress. But then things turned violent. One evening, while Lisa was cooking dinner, every cabinet in the kitchen slammed open at once. Plates shattered on the floor. A knife slid across the counter and embedded itself into the wall, inches from her face. She screamed for David, who ran in just in time to see the knife vibrating in the drywall. A few days later, Noah came running downstairs, his arms covered in scratches. He swore someone had pulled him into the closet and tried to shut the door. David checked, but the closet was empty. On the inside of the door, carved deep into the wood, were two words, "Stay here." The Parkers called in a priest to bless the house. He sprinkled holy water, muttered prayers, and insisted they'd be safe. That night was the worst of all. At 3:17 a.m., the entire family awoke to screaming, blood-curdling, echoing screams that seemed to come from the walls themselves. The air grew freezing, their breath visible in the dark. Emily's bedroom door slammed shut, trapping her inside. She pounded on the door, screaming for help, as her room shook violently. Furniture slid across the floor, drawers ripped themselves out, and crashed against the walls. When David finally broke down the door, Emily was curled in the corner, trembling. On the wall above her bed were deep black handprints, as if someone had pressed burning coal into the paint. That night, they fled to a hotel. The next morning, they returned only to grab essentials. When Lisa went upstairs, she found Emily's mirror shattered into dozens of pieces. In the shards, she swore she could see a face staring back at her, a face with hollow sockets where the eyes should have been. The family never spent another night inside the house. They left most of their belongings behind, unable to face whatever was in those walls. Neighbors say the house still sits empty, though lights flicker inside late at night. Some claim they've heard knocking from the windows as they walk by. Others swear they've seen a tall man standing in the upstairs hallway, watching. The realtor keeps trying to sell the house, lowering the price again and again. But those who tour it never make it past the second floor. The overwhelming smell of rot, the sudden cold drafts, the shadows that seem to move when no one's looking, it's enough to send people running. The Parkers don't talk about Briarwood Drive anymore. But if you ask Emily, she'll tell you the same thing she told her mother the last night they lived there. He doesn't want the house. He wants us. Hey everyone, thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed the video, please hit that like and subscribe button, and then share it with your friends. Your support helps us grow and create even more awesome content. We appreciate you being part of the journey.